So all, thanks for allowing me here. Thank you for Pastors Bonnie and Anthony for letting me be here. I love to speak my testimony. A testimony is a story about a changed heart and how God has showed up in someone's life, and God did show up in mine quite dramatically, and that's what I'm here to share. So I'll just go right into it. I am from Tallahassee, Florida, otherwise known as Tallahickey. They'd be very angry if they heard me say that. But yes, it's Tallahassee. I was born and raised there. It's the capital of Florida. It's a government town. It is the home of 3 universities. And when I was growing up, very much a small southern town, about 150,000 people. And what I remember most is the church that I grew up in. It was a very large Baptist church, and it had a wonderful youth department, as I'm sure that you have here. And every time the doors were open at the church, I was there because I wanted to see my friends, and I just felt it was a safe place. It was a safe spot for me. And I gave my life to Christ at age 11, and yes, so when I think back on my time and growing up, I think back on First Baptist Church. So I moved to New York City in 1993. When I was 23, I went to a little college and got a degree in music. So as one does when you get a degree in music, you try to go on the Broadway stage, right? I was one of those people, yes. So I moved up to New York. I was like, you know what? Let me give this a shot. And I had pretty low expectations. It was really kind of like my backpacking across Europe, my grand adventure after college. I expected to completely bomb and maybe go back to Tallahassee and do something productive. Turns out I auditioned, loved auditioning, loved the acting community, and did find some success there. Surprisingly, it shocked me to no ends that I made something called the New York Gilbert and Sullivan Company, and I was with them for 6 years. I did a tour in Europe, and I sang on a cruise ship, and did all kind of different theater gigs, and just loved it. But I also fell in love with New York City, which also very much surprised me. I went from a town of 150,000 to, guess what, like 7 million. You know, so to say that I fell in love with New York City was no small thing. It seemed to fit me. It seemed to suit me. And again, there's no one more surprised than me that was the case. But falling in love with New York City is one thing. Being able to live there is another, because it's one of the most expensive cities in the world, by some statistics, the most expensive. And so for somebody who worked at TCBY Yogurt for a few years in high school and Wendy's for one day in college, which is another story, my resume was not all that impressive, right? To all of a sudden be on the hook for a couple of $1,000s a month in rent. And in my lower moments, I was kind of doing my own poll at an audition, like, what does everybody do? How do you live here? And one guy said, hey, I'm a New York City tour guide. And so from him, I learned that you have to study to be able to pass an exam, which gives you a license, and that's how you're able to be a tour guide. So I spent a whole year studying, and I still barely passed that exam. And I even remember, that was so traumatizing. All these years later, I still remember some of those questions, and some of them I still can't answer. Anyway, but I became a tour guide in July of 1995, and I immediately start working on the double-deckers, and I know that you all have those in LA, and I loved it right off the bat. But one interesting aspect of back then, I don't think it's the same. Our double-deckers don't use live tour guides anymore in New York City, which is kind of a bummer. But back then, they used you not just to do tours in the bus, but also do walking tours. It was a feature of something else that they offered tourists. So I was put on the track of giving walking tours of the original World Trade Center site. So yet again, I had to go through that hardcore studying, because walking tours is like another level of tour guiding. You really have to know everything you can see all around you. So after studying that up, I began giving walking tours of the original site, and I took several thousand people up to that original observatory in the South Tower. And, I just was so proud of that, because to be able to tell people facts about New York City, you have to know them like the back of your hand yourself. And I felt like such an adult, like I'm a big girl now, And I loved it. I love tourism, even pretty much on par with how much I loved being a singer. It just was maybe another form of it, you'd almost say, of being an actress. So, but I remember that original 16 acres so very well. If it was the same configuration now, I could just go right on back and take people around the 16 acres. You see the two towers there. They were amazing. Who here, did anybody go up to the observatory? Or even going on the grounds? So yes, I mean, it's been there since the early 1970s. You have the tower to the left, which is the North Tower. It had that famous Windows on the World, restaurant. The tower to the right was a 110-floor observatory. And back then there were two observatories in town. What was the other one? Here's my tour guide coming out in me. Empire. I have to say, whenever I would see the itinerary that had the World Trade Center instead of the Empire State Building, I was so happy, because I actually preferred it to this day, that view. So when you got up there to that 110th story view, you could see 50 miles out. It was just such an incredible view. And there were so many notable buildings, not just in the 16 acres, but in the periphery as well. So just a great, fun tour to give that I just cherish doing it. So I put this here to kind of take us back to where I was right before 9/11, because now we're several years, away from me living in Tallahassee and me living in New York. And said, God was a well-qualified counselor for personal struggles, but I held tightly to the idea that I made things happen and I had it all under control. And that was the name of the game for me, was I've got this, all it is the success of being an actress is you go to so many auditions. From so many auditions, you get so many callbacks, and then from so many callbacks, you get gigs. And that kind of the same formula was in every aspect of my life. So meaning when it all came down to me. And the effort I wanted to put into, I was in control. And that was my mantra in every aspect of my life. And it was college when all of the things that First Baptist Church taught me growing up pretty much fell to the wayside. Maybe it was kind of like, maybe if we were driving in the same car, it was kind of in the passenger, and then it made the back seat, then it made the trunk, and then my relationship was pretty much the fumes from the car as I was driving down the road. So by 9/11, I really had long since kind of left that sweet kind of pastime relationship and used God. If there was any relationship at all, it was my genie in the bottle. Like, okay, God, I really care about getting, I had several callbacks for The Sound of Music on Broadway. I'm like, okay, God, let me do good on this callback. I want this gig. Or, ooh, that guy, we've been dating 2 months. Oh, God, make this work out. So it was whenever I would just rub that genie in the bottle when I wanted something. But that was as far as things went in that relationship at that period. And here I was, went on Match.com. Yet again, I'm in control. See, I can build a bear, build a man. I did a build a man. I'm just going to the head's going to look like this. It's going to wear this outfit. It was totally like, I'm putting that together. Yep, woo, here's a man, woohoo. So in fact, I have to say this, and I hope this is not the only thing you remember when you leave here, but we are considered Match.com's longest married couple in its history. That's not why I'm here. That's not why I want you to remember. But it actually is true, because we met in, I think it was 98, and I think the company started, I think it was here in California in 96. So we are, to their knowledge, the oldest married couple. And anyway, so yes, and we got married in 2000, and here's our little angel Gabriel and our little Boston Terrier. So yeah. The sky was the limit for us. So when it was, I always lived in Times Square when I was an actress. That was, when you're an actress, you want to live near where the auditions are, where your community is, and where the theaters are. So when my husband said, I found this great apartment in the financial district, I was like, whoa, who lives there? That's where people work. It's not where people live. But then I was thinking, well, that's really cool. I give walking tours of the World Trade Center complex. I'm going to live right near where I work. That's kind of fantastic. But when he showed me the apartment, I was like, ding, ding. Yeah, I'm all right with that, because it had this wonderful 300 square foot terrace. So in New York City, if you have a private outdoor space, that's really rare. It's for the wealthy. We were not wealthy. It just was attached to the apartment, and it didn't make the rent any more than if it didn't have a terrace. But it was wonderful to have that. I love being outside, and here was my view. So we had a north-facing view, which was the Twin Towers. And who here loves Christmas trees? I do. You know, I love Christmas trees, and I remember that at night, you know, a lot of the offices kept their lights on, and so with everything else kind of dark, you could see those two towers, a quarter mile in the sky, 110 floors, an acre per floor, lit up like a Christmas tree. I remember there was even one night that I actually slept in the lawn chair on our terrace, because like, I've made it. They're the little people down below. Hello. I'm on the 24th floor, and from the 24th floor, you know, I didn't normally hear sounds from the street level. It was just literally me and the air, the beautiful old buildings, because you're one of the oldest areas in town, and those beautiful Twin Towers. I literally, with my new husband, our angel Gabriel, I literally felt like I had it made. There was nothing I felt like that would stop me now. That was truly where I was at when 9/11 happened. And I love this picture. We moved into this apartment July the 7th, 2001. Yes, 2 months before 9/11. We were there such a short time. I'd only taken one photo of us on our terrace, and that's it. So some context, I was 31, almost 32. My husband was 35. We'd been married about a year and a half, and we had been in that apartment 2 months. Our stuff was still in boxes, still slowly unpacking. I do want to point out the Twin Towers in the background, though. That particular camera, I had, you know, old school cameras when we had cameras. You'd have to add like 30 more stories to each of those towers to get the height. Even my camera couldn't capture them. So on the morning of September 11, 2001, at 8:46, I was still asleep. So the impact of the first plane hitting the North Tower shook our building. And we don't normally get earthquakes in New York City. That being said, we had one a couple of months ago. But apart from that, we didn't normally have earthquakes. And so it shook our building. My husband knew something horrible had just happened. So he came, he woke me up, we ran into the terrace. And again, when I tell you about what the noise was like, where normally I couldn't hear anything from the 24th floor, there was so much collective noise. There was screaming from everybody running away from the towers. There was ambulance sirens. There were police sirens going up the West Side Highway to the burning towers, that all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's noise. And then I remember trying to call my mom. She was playing tennis, as one does, and she didn't answer the phone. I called my best friend. You know, I was just more of just kind of engaged, feeling like I was still asleep and just having a nightmare. And all of a sudden, over my right-hand shoulder, the second plane came, went right in front of us, turned to what I would call an 8 o'clock or 2 o'clock, went right into the South Tower, and the shock waves of us being so close to that plane going so fast and with such power actually blew us back into our apartment. Now, a couple of things I want to keep in mind. We were on the 24th floor. That second plane went into floors 78 to 86, roughly. So that is a very small distance between the two. And also, a blessing of that day was the fact that the terrace doors were open. So when we had gone out to check things out and we could see the flames coming from either side of the North Tower, we had kept those doors open, which was very much a blessing from what occurred, you know, a short time later. So I was on the floor of our living room, and my dog was jumping on me, trying to wake me up, and Gabriel was just as freaked out as we were. And the first thing I remember is my husband screaming different things. And I remember he was talking about shoes, and he was yelling too. I have a very chillaxed husband, by the way, and he was literally just even seeing him completely in panic it just all felt surreal. But I got up and ran into our lobby floor, and you know what was really nice to know is what we learn in school kicks in. Immediately I thought, what was I thinking on the 24th floor? Stairs, not the elevator, right? So good to know that it kicks in when you need it. So ran down the 24 flights. Brian grabbed our 40-pound Boston Terrier, and it took him a little bit longer to get down those stairs. Where the stairwell exited was not the front of our building, but with the side, and it faced a very busy West Side highway. And I had some few moments there to collect myself while my husband was taking down our dog floor by floor. And I remember seeing all of these people run by me, run south. They're all running in the same direction, away from the Twin Towers, all in different states of dress. Everybody was holding their briefcases or what have you above their heads from falling debris, which was falling right outside. We were that close. And seeing people bloodied and the clothing that they were wearing shredded. And I realized, whoa, I'm wearing pajamas with no shoes. So when my husband and dog got there, I was like, okay, Brian, we need to go back into our lobby and back up to 24 floors so I can put some clothes on and start this crazy whatever's happening again. And even in that amount of time, they wouldn't let us back into our apartment, and so we have to use the elevators for evacuation only. But when I put on my husband's socks and I was looking around, like, no one here cares what I look like, what I'm dressed or not dressed in. We're in some kind of a crazy universe. So I put this slide here to just kind of remind you what Manhattan looks like. Manhattan's an island. And where we live, the island ends, surrounded by water. So you have the New York Harbor south, you have the Hudson, you have the East River. So if you see that dark green, a lot of you have probably been there. Who here has been to the Statue of Liberty? So odds are, even though you can get to the Statue of Liberty from Jersey, most people go in Manhattan. That's where you picked up the ferry to go to the Statue of Liberty. So you're probably familiar with Battery Park. So for us, that was as far away as we could get. So we traipsed down there to the park, and we thought we're safe. Even from that vantage point, however, people were standing at the top of the park, and they're watching the Twin Towers burn, and even from there, you could see bodies falling from the building. And I remember thinking, that's the last thing I want to see. Even though everybody I was like, I can't handle this. We walked down to the very tip and sat down on a bench that overlooked the water. There was a lot of rumors going around on Battery Park. Our cell phones were no longer working. And I had heard a rumor that a plane was about to hit the Statue of Liberty. Strange rumor. There was a lot of rumors. We were all trying to catch each other up. Nobody knew what was going on. And so I remember looking at the Statue of Liberty thinking, no, please, not the Statue of Liberty. Place where I bring tourists to all the time. When the ground started rumbling, and I didn't know what that was, and I think we all understood at the same time that the building was coming down. There was a lot of rumors in that park that morning. That wasn't one of them. So it took us all by complete surprise, and that's when the craziness began for us, because we all knew if it fell lengthwise in any direction, and it fell south, it would have reached us in the park. So they've done studies to try to figure out if it hadn't imploded, which was a blessing, what would the radius have been? And yes, they've confirmed it would have reached us in the park, but we didn't need any study back then. We knew exactly that it would have done that. So people were doing all kind of stuff. They chucked themselves into the New York Harbor and tried to swim to Governor's Island. Did you know that boats plucked people out of the waters all day that day? And Governor's Island is not close. So people were just literally going crazy because you're trapped. We were trapped down there. And we were immediately covered with dust and debris. That's what it looked like. It's like we were in a snow globe, just trying to breathe. I remember I had that like a flimsy cotton half dress on. I remember trying to bring it up and put it over my nose so I could try to breathe. Of course, that did nothing. It was like totally thin. And but we ran around in that blob for quite a while. And there was one point where my husband and I stopped at it's called the fort. A fort. It's an old 1806 fort. And I remember saying, "Are we going to die?" to my husband, because it just seemed like we weren't going to get out of this. I've never had any near-death experience. I'd never had really anything bad happen. I'd never even been in any kind of a car wreck or anything like that. But just, it seemed like this could be the end. It looked like Armageddon to me. And he said, maybe. And he grabbed my hands and began praying the Lord's Prayer. And I just was so frustrated. I was like, this stinks in every single way. Not just for us, but for what we thought it was tens of thousands of people who probably died in those towers. But for me personally, I was taking it personally. I was like, I just met this man. And how did it come to this? Like, how this is crazy. This is New York. We're in a modern, why am I seeing bodies on the ground? Why is any of this happening? And I was thinking about my faith, my childhood faith that I had long since put behind. And I was thinking, well, where is that in my life? Well, I had nothing to access. It had long since been gone. And I was also thinking, well, the only thing I've cared about the last several years was my Broadway stardom dreams, which is doing me no good in this situation. So I kind of felt like I had nothing. And I'm facing eternity, and where am I going? I'm going somewhere. Where is that? So there was a lot going on, and I remember all of it, and I'm not exaggerating. I can remember the thought process going from thought to thought to thought and just coming up with nothing. So I do remember looking out into the water and seeing a lot of ships come up the Hudson. And I'm a tour guide. I give tours on boats every once in a while, but it was a huge amount of boats. Unbeknownst to me, the Coast Guard had issued a CB radio call asking boat owners and boat operators to consider bringing their boats over to Battery Park to pick people up, to get them to safety. So I lined up with everybody else, boarded a boat, dropped us off in New Jersey. Our particular boat dropped us off in New Jersey, but those boats dropped people off everywhere. Did you know that 500,000 people were taken off the island of Manhattan that day? It's the largest boat evacuation in history, and it was larger than Dunkirk, if you've heard of that. It is a story that's not told a lot. It was one of those kind of stories that came out little by little as the years went on. So as a tour guide, I enjoy telling people about the heroism of those boat owners and operators who spent all day getting people in Manhattan, dropping them off, and to create this real hero story of all these people coming together to help people in need. And a lot of those boat owners and operators are not with us anymore because they breathed in that dirt and dust all day. So here's some other pictures of the boat evacuation. So there's several reasons why we could not get immediately back into our home. One of them was our home looked like this. That's a big reason. Another one is they registered on the Richter scale that the Twin Towers coming down as an earthquake. So because of that, they had to test over 600 buildings within a radius of the World Trade Center complex to see if those buildings were solid enough or if they were about to crumble. Were they shaking off their foundations? And again, it was just one big crime scene. They found parts of one of the planes on the terrace next door to ours. And so all of that together, we were homeless. I'd never had that experience. I'd never had the experience of not being able to go to my own bed with my own pillow. And I found that pretty discombobulating. And to compound kind of where we were at, our dog got sick right away. Threw up a hamburger we'd given him before that day had finished, threw it right up, and we only had 2 days to realize this dog is in trouble. Now, we did catch him licking his fur, as dogs do, and cats as well when they're dirty, and that dirt was filled with glass, among other things, that had shredded his insides. And you know that Boston Terriers already have that interesting kind of like, I call that brachial thing they call it. So he was not he was in jeopardy. We put him in the vet, who was working hard to keep him alive. And then lastly, my husband, and worst, my husband found out that one of his fraternity brothers had died in the company that lost the most employees of all of them, 658 Cantor Fitzgerald. So that's Jim, and he was dating somebody in his office, Amy O'Doherty. So by that point, we were suffering from PTSD. I didn't even know what it was. I thought that was returning war vets or what have you. I was awake, couldn't sleep. My husband was asleep. He couldn't wake up. We weren't talking to each other. We weren't communicating. Next slide, Danica, thank you. And then I had a friend who said, hey, our church is offering help for people like you. And for victims of 9/11, go to our church, my church, apply for help, and they will help you. You need it. And, of course, I was like, no. I don't need help. I'm not a victim. People hurt worse than me. I don't go to your church. They probably will want to know if I'm a Christian. They'll probably ask me to come up with receipts. They'll probably make intrusive follow-up calls and how are you doing? And I'll get all these postcards asking me to go to church. Not that I had anything horribly against that. I really didn't like being called a victim. And when I look back now, it was really just pride. I just didn't want to say that I was at rock bottom, which I was absolutely at rock bottom. So the long and short of it is, I did go. They produced a check in 2 seconds for my vet bill, but more importantly, these two ladies who were in charge of the fund and distributing it, they just asked, tell us anything you want to tell us, and don't tell us anything you don't want to tell us. And because I went in there, I was like, I'm not going to tell them anything. Like, they can pay my vet bill or not. I don't know these people. I don't want to tell my strangers my story, who I don't know. But, of course, that didn't happen. I went in blubbering. I was probably there for an hour. But what those ladies did in such a gentle, loving way is they bore witness to my pain, which I learned later, much later, is a thing. It's a psychological term. And it was the most healing thing on my journey up to that date. And I just so appreciated that and needed it. And it made me want to go to church there. So we went to a service at this church. It was, if you see Pastor Tim Keller there, I'd never heard of him. I didn't know who the guy was. And he gave a speech about 9/11 for several Sundays afterwards. But I remember being struck by what he had to say, which was, we don't know the reason. This is his actual words from that service I heard. We don't know the reason that God allows evil and suffering to continue, but we know what the reason isn't, and we know what the reason can't be. It can't be that he doesn't love us. It can't be that he doesn't care. And why? Because he got involved with his son. Christianity alone tells us that God lost his son in an unjust attack. And that was really powerful for me. And the long story is that, making it short, is we started going to church there. We got involved right off the bat. We joined what you call a life group here. We call it a community group there. We went to a mission trip in 2003 to Peru. And just in every way, I felt the church embraced us. I made certainly lifelong friends right off the bat. My husband started working for this church. He wasn't unfortunately able to work for a year after 9/11 because he was so affected. And then he re-entered the workforce by working for Redeemer. I became their director of missions, and then, amazingly, got to bless people like I had been blessed, which was my role. It all came full circle. And which is really where I have to go is coming full circle, is now here I am. I'm with the church, fully loved, fully know who Jesus is. My husband and I are wrapped in the arms of people who love us and who are brothers and sisters in Christ, because when you are in Christ, you're my brothers and sisters. And we don't have to know each other. And here I am with my sisters in South Africa, Bumi and Busi, who are my sisters. And it doesn't matter that we don't speak the same language or wear the same clothes, except I am wearing the same clothes. They made that outfit for me, which I treasure. But next slide, Danica. I'm still a tour guide. But now, again, we're going to go through, go full circle. I am now giving tours instead of the original World Trade Center site. I give tours of the 9/11 Memorial, and I tell everybody my story, and I tell them how God has saved me, and God came into my life and changed my heart. I get to do that. I get to tell them everything how God literally took kind of a heart of stone and turned it to a heart of flesh and turned it to Him. And what a privilege that is. So I wrote a book. It's a long testimony. I just did a half-an-hour testimony. This is a 300-page testimony, and I felt I wanted to write this down. Not everybody can get to New York, but I wanted people to have access if I couldn't tell them myself. And I have two ladies here that testimony wouldn't be here in a book form if it weren't for them. So this is Marla and Tammy, and literally they wrote this book for me. And here they are in California. And the craziest thing is I'm meeting Marla for the first time. So if it weren't for these two ladies, that book would not be here. So a world of thanks. And here they are, listening to me what they've read a million times since then. So I was just really glad that I was able to write down how God, just literally turned my life around. I have to close in saying that I had COVID in March, and these ladies would know because they've been with my journey, and they know that I came close to dying. And I was hospitalized twice, told I had a 50% chance of surviving. We do believe that the effect of breathing in the dust did affect our health. And potentially that is why I had a bad case of COVID. We'll never know. But I remember when I was in the hospital, I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't pick up the computer. I couldn't talk I literally didn't have the breath for the phone. But everything in media was talking about COVID. And I felt like I really could die any moment. And I noticed my breathing got labored, that I went downhill when I turned on the TV and watched bad things about COVID. And I went downhill when I would look at social media and scroll through all the horrible stories. And I was like, I don't need any of this. This is just me and God at this point. It is literally, nobody could visit me. My husband couldn't visit me. Doctors were pushing things under the door so they wouldn't be infected by me. And I was like, it's just me and you, God. And here we are. And you want to take me out? This is the end of the road for me. That's great. But thank you. Thank you. And here I am. And He saved me from that as well. But I have to say that the emphasis on that is one calamity with God, one calamity without. And I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't do the without ever again. And I never will have to do that ever again. And I wouldn't suggest it either. But this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Galatians. I love tons of Colossians too. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave Himself for me. So here I am as my testimony. Thank you so much for letting me share.